Christmas, Charles.
Merry Christmas, Jason. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, travel day yesterday.
Which jet did you take?
Yeah, the G5. Yours was in the shop.
I know. It's that time of year, you know.
Now, you've got an amazing presentation for us today, Charles, about the classic C.K. Ortell fantasy novel about the Lyin witch and her wardrobe.
I wish it were a fantasy novel and not God's truth. But and I have to, before we get into this, I just once again, I mean, this art department, I don't know how they do what they do, but they do such a great job. And
well, thank you.
You know, evidently Hillary Clinton is so smart that she will listen to absolutely no one. And I mean, this approach of dressing like you know, she's better equipped to guide the Starship Enterprise. I mean,
I should have put the crazy purple lapel version in there, but
yeah,
these are done under a time crunch.
I mean, no to the pantsuit. Just not a sweet move, really.
Who is her stylist? I don't know. But Charles, you know, you've been on a tear. Okay, here we've got Biljana. Let me bring her on, and she will join us.
Great.
You've been on a tear. I was listening to an excellent appearance that you did on Lionel. Just was it yesterday or?
Yesterday morning. Yeah, Lionel is a wonderful human being, a lot of experience. Plus, he's, you know, in addition to being an accomplished lawyer, he's a stand-up comedian, which some would say there's not enough of that in the law. But he's a stand-up comedian. He's an actor. He's involved with music.
What has he acted in? I didn't realize he was an actor. Oh, he was in that movie,
yeah.
right?
Well, but in many different things. He's won an Emmy. I don't know for what exactly. And his wife is also highly accomplished in media, in various aspects of producing and developing media content. And so he has a long, distinguished career. He's frequently on all kinds of television and radio, and his own podcast has got, I think, 116,000 subscribers or something like that. And he has quite a fertile, witty mind. He gave early prominence to this whole Clinton Foundation mess.
Well, I tell you what, that's the first place that I saw you was on Lionel's YouTube channel.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
So that was, you know, it's always good to see you on there. I think we're just having a little technical difficulties with Skype to Sweden here. We'll
maybe the Swedish elves are on Christmas break, because it's already close to what, it's 10 o'clock over there, Christmas Eve. And actually, I know from my many years traveling there that this time of year in Sweden, they take it very seriously. It's not simply Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It's, I think, 12 days and all kinds of festivals and holidays.
Like the song.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, perhaps a partridge in a pear tree is preventing Skype from connecting, but we'll get Biljana on there. Where would you like to begin right now, Charles?
Well, I think let's go to the first page, which somehow we got to page 6. But
yeah, I'm just distracted here by the Skype issues. I'm not
sure
all right. Why we're not able to get it.
There we go. Okay. While we're waiting for Biljana, what we try to do is we try to tailor our message each broadcast to something that sounds similar, and that something may have been.
Okay, we've got Biljana. Hello, Biljana.
Hello.
Hey, Biljana. Merry Christmas.
Can you hear us both?
Merry Christmas, both of you.
Wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, Biljana. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
How's the weather in Sweden?
It's in Gothenburg. Sweden is a very, very long country. So I live kind of south, and it's desolate in my neighborhood. It's completely rainy and dark, and there's no feeling of Christmas at all.
Are you talking now about Chappaqua?
Well, hopefully having you virtually in New York, a little bit of the Christmas cheer will rub off, and we can all enjoy this Christmas special together.
Yeah, that's the first time I spent Christmas with two unknown men. Unknown, but virtually known men.
Okay, so
Hi,
one.
Hi, Biljana. How are you?
So what we're going to do right now, Charles, is why don't we start with the first slide, and you can carry us through the presentation, and of course we'll have Biljana with us to provide insights and commentary from the wonderful land of Sweden.
Great. And so what I'll do, I'll just start by summarizing. This is going to be a conversation. We've got a lot of material to go over, and jump in anytime, Biljana, you have an observation or a question. But just to summarize how this presentation is going to play out here, we've talked before many times that the Clinton, in quotes, business model for charities and for life is a two-pronged business model. On the one hand, you have the essential lie, the ability of somebody as a senator or a governor or attorney general or a president or presidential candidate to look you directly in your face and lie with impunity. That's a central feature of the Clinton modus operandi. The other being, you got to make sure that you're in a position to obstruct justice. And you do that either because you're president of the United States, or you're going to be president of the United States, you're rigging the system to be president of the United States, or because you're the attorney general of the state or the governor. It's tougher to obstruct justice as a senator, but believe it or not, as we've shown in the past, Hillary Clinton definitely did that by squelching any valid inquiry into the true state of her various foundations while she lied her way across the finish line to become Secretary of State. So as we think about this saga that we're going to go through here, this is not, somebody slipped on a banana peel once. This is not somebody went 2 miles over the speed limit. This is somebody who decided she was going to fly a spaceship into the White House, dressed in her pantsuits, and just, ignore all the rules of operation. And what they try to do, the Clintons, is they try to get you to focus on the higgly-piggly small stuff, Were there or were there not emails? Were there or were there not secret servers? The big thing that we have to think about here, and we'll get into it, and why we call it the Chronicles of Irania, is through 2016, for a long period of years in many different ways, the United States had serious sanctions against Iran. Serious sanctions. Indeed, you go back to the very beginning, why Mark Rich got in trouble in the 70s and 79, is that Mark Rich, this now deceased, thankfully, crook.
Oil, right?
Oil, trading oil with Iran when we had strict sanctions against doing that. So we had a long period, 79 forward in the United States. We can debate, why are we in this place? Was it such a smart move to let Jimmy Carter and that other idiot, Brzezinski, who really is a seriously stupid man, but very arrogant.
He's dead now.
Still dead.
Yeah. Now, not to digress, Charles, but it's important that it wasn't just trading oil, right? Mark Rich was involved in creating a secret oil pipeline with Israel. It was like an amazing level of collusion.
Right, exactly. And so we go back into 79 forward all the way to 2016. There was this long period of time where Iran does have a large economy, does have a lot of oil and natural gas, and there are a lot of countries around the world, including, unfortunately, Sweden, and many European countries and companies, many in Germany and Austria, that wanted to sell and want to sell machinery into Iran. So they were quite happy, and in Canada as well, they're quite happy to break the American sanctions, and they're quite happy for an American sanctions regime, because that in theory meant that our companies and our entrepreneurs couldn't compete against these other people who were willing to subsidize the kleptocracy, the brutal kleptocracy that has operated in Iran since 1979. So there's
May I
a
ask
big
you a question.
Sure.
Is it not correct that they also sometimes take advantage of these sanctions in order to, like if something's illegal to sell, you can make a much higher premium from it?
Sure. There's what people don't understand, is you cannot eliminate markets. There's a market in everything. You could change a law, make something illegal, that just pushes up its price typically.
Right.
And there's going to be a market. There's a market in everything. And indeed, within Iran, I am told, I've never had the, in quotes, pleasure of visiting Iran. I hear actually it is quite an interesting place. But in Iran, first of all, the unofficial story, which could just be baloney, but it makes sense to me, is that the kleptocracy, the mullahs who go around lecturing us about morals and all that, they take 10% off the top of everything.
Wow.
Goes into their personal pockets. And maybe there are some really devout mullahs in Iran. I hope there are. But a lot of them are not exactly, following the rules. Well, we can't, of course, make such a big deal about that because in our country, does anybody in power seem to follow the rules anywhere? But so as we get into the minutia here of what's going on in Iran, why Sweden fits into the picture, don't lose sight of the fact that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State in a crucial period of time, 2009, January 2009 through February 2013. All the while, Iran in that period was under sanctions. All the while. And we ask ourselves, why do we think it makes sense? Why would it have made sense? Are there any good reasons for Hillary Clinton and the Clintons to have secret email accounts and secret servers and secret offices? Could it be that, in order to trade and influence and exchange contributions to the foundation, maybe personal payments, that it would be a good idea to bury the fact that this was all about was trading with the enemy, which is exactly what Iran, I would argue, is, even though we lifted sanctions, but certainly was in every period when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and for most of the time that she was running for president. Iran was actually a named entity under sanctions, and even though Barack Obama and the bonehead John Kerry believed that the Iran deal was a good deal, I kind of side with Trump when he says it's the worst deal, giving Iran $150 billion, lifting the sanctions, doing it in a way that's going to it's going to be very tough for us to get a coalition to reimpose sanctions. America can do it, but the way in which Barack Obama and John Kerry did it will make it very difficult for us to get back to the same place.
What about the recent revelations that the Cars International A car dealership which was run by Imran Awan and the Awan brothers who are working with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and possibly others there in Congress, was now linked to Hezbollah and money laundering through Iran, and that the Obama Justice Department blocked any investigations into this?
Was that during the scandal-free Obama presidency? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this in some detail, but we've been living in our country, I don't know about Sweden, but we've been living in our country where the general public, and shame on each of us for letting these politicians and media people get away with it, we have accepted the notion that these wise Illuminati down in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals and campuses, they appreciate subtleties and details that we couldn't possibly understand, So we just let that idiot James Clapper, who's just telegraphs. I mean, he shouldn't be allowed, doing this when he was testifying. He shouldn't be allowed to play a card game of poker, let alone high-stakes nuclear and spycraft negotiations. So we've been living into this crazy environment where we have abandoned the kind of inquiry that we should have into what our leaders have done. And the notion that we're going to say, prove that there's what is it called? Is it an iron river of guns going into Mexico from the United States, that we're going to do that by creating Fast and Furious, or that we're going to forge peace in the Middle East by simultaneously creating ISIS and then giving the leading state sponsor of terror, for leaving aside whether one wants to argue countries in the West are state sponsors of terror, but leaving that aside, the leading state sponsor of terror, Iran, we're going to give them $150 billion. Indeed, we're going to send it to them in cargo planes of cash.
Yeah.
Because you really wouldn't want to create the opportunity to maybe lose some of that cash and have it come back into the pockets of people connected to our political process. No, we wouldn't want to do that.
Wow.
But I mean, this is a story here with the Hezbollah thing. Hezbollah is a despicable organization. It should be, once we get done with ISIS in Syria and Iraq, we should kick it up a notch. So that we have a cook here, Biljana, called Emerald, who does a cooking show. He's from Louisiana. Kick it up a notch here and take out these Hezbollah people around the world. Bam!
So the Chronicles of Irania, Charles.
And that Lion Witch in her wardrobe. Let's get right into it.
Yes.
So, Biljana, what we try to do in each presentation is just remind the audience that everything we're going to say now is based on publicly available source material. In our country, in America, we're still allowed to express our opinion. And I understand that things are not necessarily the same in Sweden, that there's control of what you can say. But I'm saying this from the United States of America. I'm going to say what I want to say. And we direct people to the sources here. There's additional information on my site. You can contact, obviously, me through my site and also through Twitter. Jason is building subscribers right and left, and I'm beginning to build a few followers on Twitter. But what we've done, Jason has done on the YouTube site, is to list out a simple playlist how you can get to all the previous editions of this show. And for those of you who are investigators, for example, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, I notice you're running for governor or senator, I think. You have the ability, flip of the switch, stroke of the pen, open up an investigation here. Get your team. Maybe Missouri charity laws are not as strict as they are in New York, but you have the ability. I don't want to go quite there yet.
They can't see that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't know what you're doing. You have the ability to open up an investigation in Missouri, and you ought to do that. And if you're going to do that, you might want to watch all the preceding shows. So is this the next page, or
Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
There it is.
So we like to cover, Biljana, in each presentation what we felt or feel is the most important thing that may have happened in the last week. And we've been very busy over this side of the pond. Particularly Donald Trump has been extremely busy. And what people don't necessarily understand inside our country and outside our country is that not only did Donald Trump's tax plan, the Republican tax plan, pass, but he passed it on a basis where every single Democrat voted against it. And very few people had the time to read the whole bill as the way we do things over here. I don't think we should do it this way, but it's the way we do it. This is a very lengthy bill. And in sum and substance, what it does is it gets after-tax incomes for the lower and middle classes are going to go way up in states that do not have high state and local income taxes. In states where there are high state and local income taxes, people who make, let's say, more than $150,000, $200,000, that's not middle class anymore. You're up in the very top of the pile in our country when you make that kind of money. You may have some problems depending on where you live and how much debt you have, and you could have some problems. But for the mass of humanity inside this country, people who make $70,000 per household, that's the average in our country, 70,000, including all the millionaires and billionaires. 70,000 is the average. So if you take the millionaires and billionaires out, you're talking about people, 80% of this country make on average like $50,000 a year all in. Those people are all going to be a lot better off under this. And by the way in which Schumer and Pelosi have opposed, and the Democrats have opposed this, they have created food for campaign advertisements that are going to be delicious. I mean, the Republicans are not going to have to do much. They're going to just lift the footage of Schumer, dopey Chuck Schumer, saying yet another stupid thing about the tax bill that's completely wrong, and then 8, 9, 10, 11 months from now, contrast reality with insanity. And you can do that with Pelosi, you can do it with all these, and that's a really big thing and a very skillful achievement that I don't think Trump and his people get enough credit for. This is really historic stuff.
Interesting. How long until Schmuck Schumer resigns?
I don't think he'll ever resign. He's probably already working with doctors to, after his body goes away, to like mind meld it in with artificial intelligence so he'll be with us forever. But
hope not.
I certainly hope not. Now, on this, right after the tax bill became locked in, Donald Trump signed this executive order, which is brutal. And
we might historic.
We might want to pull this up here.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, Biljana, if you've had a chance to see this executive order, but we're not going to go through it in great depth. But what the people around the world who have been looking at this, and there's something called 4chan, and there's something called 8chan, and there's something called QAnon, and there are obviously a lot of humans as well looking at this in some depth. But basically what this tells me is that Donald Trump and the team have found their feet certainly in Congress, now in the IRS. They've gotten rid of that idiot Koskinen. They're probably cleaning house there. They're moving on the FBI. They're moving on the Justice Department. And with this executive order, they're sending a clear signal around the world that we are finally going to get serious in the United States about exposing public corruption, human trafficking, other gross stuff that happens around the world. We're not going to put up with this stuff anymore. And with everything, all the revelations that have happened in Hollywood and Washington, around the country, around the world already, this puts new teeth into the process of chasing this kind of stuff down. And the way I read it, I'm not a lawyer, the way I read it, an entity like the Clinton Foundation and like charities connected to the Clinton Foundation that could be touched by these sorts of activities is not an entity I'd be sending any money to. Mm-hmm. And it's not an entity I'd be very comfortable serving on as a trustee for. And to me, this seems to be clear signals that the Team Trump is finally ready to move, and that one of the ways we may be able to close this budget deficit that's baked in for a number of years now under any scenario is by enforcing this executive order and chasing the cash down wherever it may be around the world. So this is a big move.
Now, Charles, both you and QAnon have said that the resignation of Eric Schmidt from Google, which is like, why did he do that? He just kind of out of nowhere resigned. Google's doing great. It's certainly very suspicious and seems to be linked to this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I've got to believe that the flip side of the concentration of power into the hands in media land and ad land into the hands of Facebook and Google and Twitter. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is that in order to clean up a swamp, you just need to start by targeting 3 of these companies. And who knows what sort of nefarious activity may be going on inside Google, inside Facebook. I'm not saying by them, but by crooks and fraudsters who figured out ways of gaming Google and Facebook and Twitter. Who knows how much of that stuff is not just little scams, but actual human trafficking or child sex prostitution or drug smuggling or money laundering. How much of that might be going on inside these companies, either known to them and not shared with the government, or not known to them, and in any case, they're culpable. So,
Jake Morphonios, who's a good friend of the show, has done a series of investigations into child pornography on YouTube, and he's pointed out in great detail how, you can't even say they're seemingly innocent videos, but the way they link to other ads and the imagery that they show and the sexualization of children and everything. And when he's done that, his videos get demonetized by Google and stuff. So it's interesting to see how this develops. We're going to have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, so this is one plank of it. The other is the next transnational thing up there in the top.
Next webpage? Oh.
Yeah. So this is a page that you really don't want to be on. There's something called the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or for short, OFAC. And you see it there, Office of Foreign Assets Control. If your name, and what mother, I don't know if this mother was thinking clearly, naming her, or keeping the name Pick-Hugen, or anyway, Yuri Viktorovich Pick-Hugen. You'll see there's a long list of people and companies have been added to this OFAC list. And once you go on this list,
OFAC,
you are fact Jack. I mean, you're done. And people are now, particularly the QAnon side, are tearing this list apart. There's another set of editions the preceding day, and I think the succeeding day you could see as well. They're tearing this apart, and what they're discovering at first blush is that there are a large number of these that are connected either to the Clintons or to the Clinton Foundation or to Clinton Foundation joint venture partners or entities. So there's a theory that maybe, finally, the FBI and the Justice Department and others are going down a path of maybe looking at the many lists of people who claim they've donated to the Clinton Foundation through the Clinton Global Initiative and otherwise, and beginning to scoop back in and tag these people, or get ready to tag these people for the crimes they've likely committed, with the intent of going after their cash and bringing it back home to pay down our debt.
But just for people who maybe aren't directly familiar with this OFAC list, if you're on there, that means you just can't do business with them because they're criminals, right?
Americans can't do business with them, and it also means it's highly likely that that our government is going after these people for different criminal activities. So it's a list you really don't want to be on.
Right. So that's the naughty list, and somebody checked it twice. Conceivably, everybody on there is getting coal.
Exactly, the coal list.
Yeah. Okay. Very
So
good.
if we go back into the presentation itself.
Yes.
All right. The other thing that's really interesting, we've been giving on this show Mayberry RFD Jeff Sessions a hard time about not actually doing much, it would seem. And I think my first step, what I'm going to do is recuse myself, because that work thing is that's a whole pain, working.
Yeah.
I just want my salary.
Right.
But it would seem, especially with this, if you could pull up that town hall link.
Sure.
Thank you. That's the next one.
Sorry.
It does seem that what's going on here now is we're going to go back finally into the uranium one. There's an informant, we've talked about this before, that has all sorts of information concerning the degree to which the FBI was aware of what, and elements possibly in our Justice Department were aware of what exactly Russia may have been up to, trying to get a hand into America's uranium business. And now what we're going to try to do, I hope, is go back into these files. We keep bringing up the notion that there are FBI vault files and other files. There's a lot of information that the public is not going to have, but that Sessions and now Christopher Wray, the new FBI director, will have, which should allow them to go back in and understand, if it is true that people were making donations to the Clinton Foundation in, say, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9 timeframe, to try to, change the way in which a Russian company may have been treated, or some other foreign company may have been treated. And if it's true that Mueller, who was head of the FBI at this time, was aware of all this stuff, then, the idea that we're going to allow Mueller to check and see just how Donald Trump may have been, in quotes, colluding with Russia without laying out Mueller's many ties and the FBI's many ties and the Justice Department's many ties and the Obama administration, Bush administration's many ties to Russia, doesn't give it the appropriate context. And we paid, as we talked about this before, we paid for a platinum government. We shouldn't be getting a lead government. If you've done all this work in the past, what actually happened? And now we're going to find out, I think.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, Charles, that you bring up Uranium One. And I just wanted to mention real briefly, I think a lot of people know that very recently I've been doing quite a bit of work with our friend Quinn Michaels, and he's always investigating what's going on with this element 93, which is neptunium, which is a transmuted element that is achieved by bombarding uranium with neutrons. And it creates this really unique element that's basically the first synthetic element in the periodic table that has got magnetic properties and superconductivity properties. And it's kind of a mystery what goes on with this element, but it does seem like there could be quite a number of applications for it that we haven't quite heard about. So I just want to remind everyone that Quinn Michaels is still recovering in the hospital. He had a little bit of a setback with his collapsed lung, so hopefully people are subscribing to Quinn Michaels on YouTube and going to @Quinn Michaels on Twitter if they want to help him with his medical bills or follow his research there.
So is neptunium the secret ingredient in kombucha?
Exactly.
Anyway, if we go back to the presentation for a sec. So, yeah, if we can go into this Zero Hedge story, it would finally seem that the next one, in the last 24 hours or so, this story has come up where, in theory, Deputy Director McCabe may now retire. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with how the FBI in theory works, the FBI has a director who's the outward face of the FBI, but the person who runs the FBI day to day is the deputy director.
Why is that?
Well, it's standard. You know, you'll have in a company, you have the CEO as the outward-facing person, and the COO is the inward-facing company operating officer versus executive officer. It's standard approach. I think that's pretty much how, in theory, our government and many other governments actually operate. So this McCabe guy is not any old guy. I mean, he's the person who, in theory, really was responsible for making the FBI trains run on time, and allocating resources across the FBI. He should have known about any serious investigation, its course, of pros and cons. To have somebody in there whose wife is taking money from Terry McAuliffe, a notorious Clinton crony, frankly, whose own record needs to be deeply investigated for charity fraud and public corruption and other things, to have him laying in money in the hundreds of thousands. In the press, they say $500,000. We have a colleague, a friend of the show, Kevin O'Rourke, who tells me the real number is $1.2 million. And in the new year, we're going to have him on and let him do that analysis. But the notion that this guy making probably high $100,000, maybe $200,000, would have a wife running for office while he's supposedly directing investigations that target Hillary Clinton, and taking money from a close associate, the person who got Hillary Clinton her first house, her first real house in Chappaqua, when she couldn't get a mortgage, that person is funneling money to McCabe, and McCabe is supposed to be investigating Hillary Clinton and all these related scandals. Is just preposterous. But now we have the general counsel of the FBI out. Wow. This guy, McCabe, thinks that he's going to be here for another 90 days or so to collect his big fat pension. I have a funny feeling that that's going to go about as well as it went for Al Franken and Congressman Conyers. I don't think the American public's going to stand for this.
Well, as far as him keeping the FBI train running on time, I've got a graphic here that just sort of describes how off the rails Andrew McCabe's FBI actually was, and you'll see that on the playback, Charles. But it's really shocking, I think, for people to see what Andrew McCabe has done as the deputy director. And we've recently had Robin Gritz on the program, who has explained firsthand how just incredibly caustic this individual, how incredibly corrupt this individual is. And forget about resigning. Andrew McCabe is someone we need to see under criminal prosecution, in my view.
In Guantanamo, in my view.
That would be even better.
So, and I agree. If we go back to the presentation quickly. Yeah, so at the very bottom, we've talked about it in the spirit of Christmas. Here we are, Biljana. I apologize it's so late for you over there. I hope you've got some eggnog or something that you can have, or a glass of wine. But poor Corinne Brown, this congressman, who is some people think that she's a straight up crook.
Do you?
She's a politician, so probably. But she was in Congress for 24 years, and during her campaign as an African-American woman representing Jacksonville, Florida area, dopey James Comey decided that it was okay to go after her, or the Department of Justice decided it's okay to go after her. And so in the middle of her campaign, over an $800,000 slush fund, granted operating for 20 years, they indicted her. And then they proceeded with the trial during the election, and they convicted her, and they sentenced her. And now, while we're having a good time together virtually, she's sitting here in Jacksonville. She has been told, under no uncertain terms, that she must report to prison early in January. This is a 71-year-old woman. She's going to be in federal prison for 5 years. That is a long time. So why is it fair? And I really ask the President of the United States, as you're down there in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, gathering with your friends and family, why is it fair to have Lyin, crooked Hillary Clinton enjoying Christmas cheer up in Chappaqua, whatever she may celebrate up there, having cocktail parties and Chardonnay and vodka and whatever else. Meanwhile, we have somebody the same age who has been convicted 5 years in federal prison for charity fraud. I mean, it just doesn't seem right to me.
Well, I think Hillary is probably sacrificing chickens to Moloch rather than roasting turkeys for Christmas.
Right. So what I do think happened in the last week here is that, in fact, there is now, the swamp creatures better be running scared, because your future is not bright. I think, assuming we're not distracted by some protracted conflict in the Middle East or in Asia or whatever.
UFO stuff is the new thing, apparently.
Right. Unidentified felon organizations. I think we are going to we've opened, Trump has signaled now that we've opened season against the swamp. And that's going to be the story for 2018, draining the swamp. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if we go to the next page. Now, we've done, Jason, more than 18, but we've done Sunday with Charles shows, 18 Sunday with Charles shows. And I just wanted to lay this out because there's some of you who are new to the party and, we know what we've told everybody, but you may not remember exactly everything we've done before. This is a lot of time. I'm not asking people in the audience who aren't familiar with this to go back to the 20th of August and watch every single one of these shows. But what I would tell you by way of background, we're going to give better metrics in the coming presentations. But I know from now having done quite a few podcasts as being interviewed and being on television, et cetera, that anything more than, let's say, 10 minutes is long. 30 minutes is really long. An hour starts getting out there. And there's a relationship between the length of a podcast and its viewership. So that most of these things that you see that get a lot of views are 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute. Every single one of these Sunday with Charles shows that we've done is at least an hour, I believe. And many of these viewership counts we get within 3 days.
Yeah.
And so this, I'm told, because I have experts who talk to me about this, that this is pretty darn good performance to get this kind of, and I hats off to the art department, the production department, to our guests, people like Biljana. But this is good. And to the investigators who may be trying to get up to speed, if you pick some of the shows that, let's say, have the most viewership and start with those, you will find that you'll actually save a lot of time because we are distilling down facts, we're pointing you in the right direction, we think, and we may be able to help you state attorneys general, you foreign governments that are looking at this, whether you're rich countries like the United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, Australia, Canada, or poor countries in Asia and Africa and South America. This will save you a lot of time and help you as you try to exact the justice you deserve for winding up and draining this massive swamp of a charity fraud.
And Charles, just to make this a little bit more clear for some of the viewers, if people are subscribed to Crowdsource the Truth, and you just click on the playlists tab here, there's a Sunday with Charles playlist, and you can go in there and choose whichever episode you want, or you could just start on the first one and hit play all and do your own kind of customized Charles or telethon and watch all the episodes there.
Great. So now we're going to bring in Biljana and start talking a little bit about Sweden. We go to the next page. Mm-hmm. All right. What I would like to say to the audience first, even you, Jason, may not know this, but I accepted a job offer from Dillon Read in, I want to say, March of 1980, when I was in my final year of business school. And right after I accepted it, there was an announcement in the New York Times that the Wallenberg family was buying 20% of Dillon Read. Like, huh? What's this all about? I wanted to go to Dillon Read. It was an American firm with international. Why am I working for some Swedish family I've never heard of? Well, it turned out that the Wallenbergs, and Biljana will confirm this, are one of the oldest, best-known families in Sweden. And they're highly respected people. I mean, every family has black sheep, but these are people that are eminent people, and for generations have made contributions, not simply in Sweden, but around the world. And for a time, at least in the 80s, they controlled, via their holding company Investor, and by a foundation actually, they controlled many of the more significant legacy companies, the banks, insurance companies, industrial companies, you name it, they controlled. And what that meant for me, which was really a lot of fun, is Dillon Read was small, and Marcus Wallenberg was then alive. He was the very famous guy, and he channeled a ton of business to our firm. And I got the opportunity in my 20s to go repeatedly over to Sweden and do deals with all the different Swedish companies and meet all these fancy people. And through that experience, you know, I can say firsthand, it's not a normal experience, that there are many, many wonderful people in Sweden. It may lean to the left in terms of its political aspirations. There may be some crazy hard right people over there, but it truly is a land and a people that I enjoy. And it's with, you know, watching from afar what Biljana has reported on, what she's going to tell us today, it's really tragic to see a country reduced to the position that it appears to be in today by an intolerant bunch of elitist, globalist people who are trying to foist globalist notions on this small country in the hopes that their leading multinational companies and their, you know, people who fly around the world can have extraordinary influence in the UN, the World Health Organization, other world bodies. I think they are making a mistake, which Donald Trump saved us from, frankly, by his election. And, you know, so we're honored today to have, and I put this in bold caps, Biljana, the highly talented and brave Biljana. Do you have your submachine gun yet? Can you hear me?
I didn't hear the last part.
I said, do you have your submachine gun yet?
Machine gun. It's a joke.
It's a joke. All right.
Okay.
No machine gun. No machine gun in Sweden.
I couldn't believe you even mentioned it.
All right. So, Biljana, in a few paragraphs, just if you would, for our audience, remind the audience, because it's probably bigger today than when you started, a nutshell about your background and what you're focusing on now, and what you want us to concentrate on as we think through Sweden's plight.
Well, I mean, shall I give you an update of what has happened since I met you last time on Crowdsource?
Well, if you'd like, Biljana, it might be nice because we've now got 38,000 subscribers, and right now we've got 1,120 people watching on YouTube alone. So if you just give us a little bit of background for our viewers who haven't met you before, and then dive into the updates, that might be great.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Biljana Martinoski. I'm a Swedish citizen, but I have a very international background, and I live in Gothenburg, Sweden. I had a podcast about a month ago with Jason, where I was very worried about the gang rape situation in Sweden and our inability to control it and to stop it. So I shared information about the gang rapes, and now I can say that the site that I refer to, gangrapesweden.com, is shut down. It shut down almost immediately after our talk, and the reason it shut down is because it was persecuted. The people behind it felt persecuted. It was reported to the police by an extreme leftist judicial watch. They did not close the site themselves, the judicial watch or the police. It was the founders of the site that actually closed it, and I think that it was a good idea, because it's unnecessary to expose yourself to violence. And there is quite a lot of leftist extremist violence and persecution in Sweden. An open political persecution against people who do not think that like the leftist establishment or even government.
Now, Biljana, just briefly, can I ask, the organization that was looking after and putting pressure on Gang Rape Sweden was not actually the Washington, D.C. based Tom Fitton run organization called Judicial Watch. It was
No. It's a small. It's called Juridik Fronten. Juridik Front, the front of judicial front. Somehow it already gives you the sound of communism. Front. Front, and they are fighting. And who are they fighting? Their own people who want to protect themselves from heavy crimes. The people behind the persecution are those that I already mentioned from Expo, this organization Expo. Leaders such as a very famous journalist here, Robert Ashbury, and I don't understand what this night show journalist is doing to persecute people. And there is also other organizations like the Swedish Antifa, it's called AFA, and Researchgruppen, another organization. All those are interrelated, connected, and they describe themselves as the Swedish Stasi. Most openly, they describe themselves as the Swedish Stasi.
They're proud of that.
And yeah, it's actually that they are proud of it, and that they demonstrate it, and they most obnoxiously go after private citizens and their efforts to provide information to the citizens, information that does not exist. How is that related to the Clintons? I can imagine that there is a lot of information that is hidden, particularly related to the postcode lottery. The postcode lottery is something that happened as usual in a very treacherous manner. I don't think any of my 70-year-old neighbors are aware that whenever they bought a lottery, they were contributing to Clinton's campaign or Clinton's foundation. And responsible for the lottery is the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden today and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Margot Wallström. She's very famous, or I would say infamous, with her outright challenges against Israel. Now there have been a number of articles on how is she actually related to this lottery, a lottery that contributed millions to the Clinton Foundation. No one knows, it's not described how they're used, what they're used, are they paying taxes? For instance, in Sweden you pay taxes for charity. And in the States it's different. I haven't seen how this is explained, and it's not very clear how Margot Wallström herself has benefited from the lottery. So that's something that really needs to be done and investigated. But as far as I can see, there are very few conservative journalists. And if they exist, they are put in a corner in small newspapers, and these newspapers are immediately described as Nazi newspapers, although they have nothing to do with Nazism. They're provoked to be described as such. If anybody is going to investigate that, is going to be journalists from those so-called Nazi-related newspapers, which immediately makes the information much less available to people because they get scared of these labels.
Biljana, I've been speaking. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got a little delay on my audio. I've been speaking recently with Ole Damegard, and Ole, many people may know, has done a lot of research into the assassination of the Swedish Prime Minister in the 1980s. What was that Prime Minister's name?
Palme, Olof Palme.
Okay. And I think people in the United States don't know very much about that. I'd be curious to hear more about that. But also, what Ole was telling me about is that very recently, I think the number is up to 5 now, Swedish journalists between the ages of about 32 and 35 who have died of, purportedly natural causes, but it seems quite coincidental that such young individuals would all die in such a close time proximity of heart attacks and things like that.
The last one that I've heard of, at least that I've kind of researched and read about, is a Swedish Palestinian man who is 33 years old, and I heard about him, and I heard one of his shows where he's describing exactly these persecution organizations 20 hours before he actually died. So that's the first time I've heard of him, and so I thought, okay, this is a good initiative. This person is really going out there, because what Expo and Research Group and Robert Ashbury are doing is they all of a sudden come with cameras and journalists and enter your home, and they want to interview you. And they insist to come, very often in many of the cases, they insist to come inside the house. In that way, they are intimidating the family, children and wives, if it's a man in question, and most of the time it is, I guess. So what this journalist, Bashir Rabbani, was doing, he did the same. He said, if you're doing this to us, I will do this to you. So he went to his home and wanted to talk to him, but didn't find him. And he was threatened by his wife that he's going to pay for this challenging them that way. And then he posted that. I saw this for the first time, and 20 hours later, he was found dead in his bed. So, of course, a lot of people were very worried, and they thought that this is very strange, because he was very young.
Yeah.
And very fit-looking man. And he was really challenging this establishment. Then I saw much later, a few days ago, that he actually was exposed to different forms of physical violence, small things like kicking the stomach and so on. But still, and then he was also warned by the Secret Service for his approaches towards one of the journalists that has been exposing massively a lot of people for their views in a newspaper called Expressen. This man is called David Buss, and when he tried to talk to him and confront him because he wrote an article about him in the newspaper and called him a Nazi, Bashir Rabbani decided to confront that journalist and ask him, why did you say that? How do you know what my views are? And so on. So he didn't want to answer. He said, you're a Nazi, I don't talk to you. And then he didn't want to answer anymore. And from that moment on, he was confronted with Secret Service, Bashir Rabbani, and he couldn't talk to the person who described him as such. He could not confront him. This was earlier this year. So apparently, this person has provoked the so-called establishment. If this is a natural death or not, we don't know.
Right.
Some people called for autopsy. No autopsy has been done. I don't think it will be done. Which is unfortunate because it opens all the conspiracy theories, and it's not calming down the situation. It's actually making the situation more uncertain and spreading more fear. And there have been a demonstration against an article that was published in another newspaper of the same kind, Aftonbladet, which didn't respect his death and didn't respect his life. For me, this is just an example of what I talked about before, that life is so extremely politicized. Everything in Sweden is so politicized that even the death of a person, of a young 33 years old person, who
33, did you say?
33, yeah, that he hasn't had a child yet, and he hasn't touched his child's hair, and he hasn't enjoyed yet fully life of other stages in his life. How can we not respect the life beyond just beyond politics? This is where we are in Sweden. Somehow it feels that there is lack of understanding of the value of life.
Tragic.
Yeah.
Tragic. Well, thank you, Biljana. If we could maybe just go back into the presentation a little bit, because there's a lot I'd like you to comment on here. I think we have a link to your appearance with Jason, which I think, it was up there. And I'd encourage people to watch this whole preceding episode so that, they understand the full depth. This is the preceding one that you did. But if we go back into the slide presentation for today, what we have in Sweden is it's a microcosm of the problems that we face around the world, where we have these elitists who most of them come from a 1960s, 1970s, maybe 1980s radical, in theory, leftist approach to life. They've gained control now. These are deans and presidents of the universities and the think tanks. They're in control of many of these governments. And in Sweden, as we're going to show in some depth here, Sweden is unlike the United States of America. The Swedish internal market, economic market for goods and services is actually very small. And the Swedish export operation is very large. So Swedish companies, in order to survive and thrive, have to be comfortable operating internationally. And I think long ago, the Swedish elites thought, what we're going to do, we're a neutral country. They were for a long time. We will do our best to infest is the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway, to infest the UN and the World Health Organization and the many international organizations. We're going to try to insert as many Swedish people as we can into these things, because that's a way for us as Swedes to gain a higher level of influence around the world than we would if we just focused here in Stockholm. So the Swedish people over decades now have invested a lot of time and energy trying to be more than their fair share relevant at the UN, at the WHO, at the various World Bank and other organizations. And what is so very sad and shocking for me to see is that in my youth, when I went to Sweden, Sweden was a land of tolerance and intellectual curiosity. And instead now it appears to be a grossly intolerant land that for some strange reason, I guess we have, what is it called, the Stockholm Syndrome, where you feel sympathy for the person who's hijacking you?
Yeah,
is that what it's called?
kidnappers.
That's almost what we're watching in Sweden from afar, that your whole nation seems to feel that you should have more sympathy with these thugs who are coming into your country doing unspeakable things.
I don't agree with that. Everybody's saying that, but I don't believe that. You have...
Go ahead.
There is a delay. Yeah, I don't believe this theory. I thought about this before as well, and I thought, yes, maybe people do not understand what is happening and so on. But no, the truth is that what's happening in Sweden today is happening against Swedes' will. And there are operatives, leftist organizations, very organized groups of people that are pushed towards to show this face of Sweden having empathy for those who actually abuse the population. And this is not what represents Sweden anymore. And so the reason why this is continuing in the way it's continuing is because you have very severe political persecution. So it's political parties that are not allowed to communicate with other parties. They're not even. They can't even communicate with them. We're not talking about taking decisions together or having influence. We're talking about not even openness for communication and discussion. There is no openness for communication and discussion with the general audience as well, because they are closing sites. They're shutting down sites with swarm attacks. So you're not really hearing the Swedish people, and what you could hear is now lately that they're coming out on the squares and they are saying even more strongly what I'm saying, that they cannot tolerate this violence anymore, that they feel that they are disregarded, disrespected by their leaders, they need enormous and immediate change, and this migration and this violence is unbearable for them. They demonstrated in Malmö after the last 3 rapes in 1 week, and one of them a gang rape of a very young woman. Still not, there is not really information about it, but it seems that her sexual organs were burned.
Ugh.
We're talking about violence of war zone. This is not a violence in normal Swedish society. This is sadism beyond imagination.
Medieval.
Yeah. So I don't agree anymore with the interpretation that there is a Stockholm syndrome and people are in love with their abusers. I think this is the leftist position, and it's very unnatural. So having an empathy towards the person who rapes you is not empathy, because first of all you have to exist as a self. If you don't have a self, you cannot recognize the other. So you have no feeling or sense of self. Then you cannot have a sense of the other. So how can you have empathy for the other if you have no empathy for yourself?
That's
so for me, these are political positions, and they have no. There is no psychological motivation for this anymore. People have normal instincts, and they wanted to help, but there is not one of the gang rapists is deported. The gang rape we talked about last time, where the woman said she was raped by 20 people, I actually read 127 pages from the court decision, the verdict, which was very long because they knew that everybody will read it, and they wrote it in a very explicit instructional manner. What did they do? They released the five people that they had arrested. They released them. They released them all.
Wow.
And I read why they released them and how they released them. And the woman is now without really protection, and the men are free, and they can do whatever they want. They were arrested 1 year later, so they were free for a long time.
One of the worst aspects of this, Biljana, is that these individuals who are conducting these crimes feel emboldened by the fact that there is no justice. And so, do you feel there's anything that our viewers, that American citizens can do to help in any way?
I think, a lot of Americans are helping us, and a lot of people contacted me. If you think about it, if you have Swedes who are more bound to their Scandinavian origin, a person like me who is not originally Scandinavian is not representing them. For those who have more European sort of view for the population here, it is still unpleasant to talk about this, and it's considered talking against the country. I think it's talking for the country, and trying to find solutions for peaceful resolution. What people can do, and I wish we could accomplish, is to stop the persecution. Mm-hmm. I wish we could have a petition or maybe a letter to Donald Trump, the President of the United States, and all the representatives of the free world, to condemn the political persecution.
Well, maybe that's a good idea.
Let's do that.
Perhaps you could create a letter, and then what we'll do is we'll have you back on, and we can promote that petition and have people sign it and send it to Donald Trump.
I can send it to people close to Donald Trump and to people in the House and the Senate. Happy
yes,
to do that.
It is very simple. Just condemn the persecution. Yeah. And I have made a hashtag on Twitter where I collect persecution cases
We lost
that people
Biljana.
sending
Give
me.
Give us that hashtag one more time.
Paul, I can write it down for you so you see it.
Sure.
It's Mm, political persecution in Sweden. Poll persecution in Sweden.
Is that on your Twitter page?
It is a hashtag. So if you just look for the hashtag, you will find it, and I'm the main person who is posting there.
Okay. And while we're speaking about Twitter, I just want to let everyone know that they can find you on Twitter. I'm just putting up your Twitter page right now, and people should follow Biljana Martinovsky at bmartinovsky on Twitter, and you can keep up with this effort.
Thank you.
And then her website as well.
Oh yes, of course, and biljanamartinovsky.com, and please note the spelling difference between the website and the Twitter handle there. So that's good. We'll get that campaign going, Biljana, and hopefully people here in the United States can help bring some attention to this really horrendous ongoing situation there.
Now, this persecution is kind of licensed by the states because many of these organizations are actually sponsored by the state. Why is this at all happening? Before the election, before Trump won, I haven't read one positive article for Trump here. Everything was pro-Clinton, and all politicians were pro-Clinton, particularly Margot Wallström. So now, after the election, it is exactly the same establishment, the same government that is performing this violent politics against the population. Violent in two ways. First, by not deporting the violent migrants, and second, by persecuting people who decry the violence.
Yeah.
And so how is that related to Clinton? I definitely think it is related to Clintons and the Clinton Foundation and all the plans they had of what would happen if Clinton wins. And I can't imagine what would have happened to us. I mean, we are seeing it now because there is no major political change in Sweden. So we are seeing what we would have lived with, probably much worse persecution, much less chances for change. What do you think, Charles? I mean,
well, you've just come up with a title for Charles's next book, What Would Have Happened?
That's right.
What would have happened, and what are our chances now?
So I actually think your chances now are very good, assuming that we can make it through the next 12, 24, 36 months. I would encourage, if we just go back into the slides, because we have some good things that weave into what you just were talking about, Biljana. In our country, this last thing here, the time for choosing, is a very famous speech that Ronald Reagan gave in the 1960s. It's linked down here that people should listen to. Now, at the time he gave that speech, I think it was in the 1960s, when being a conservative was not something that was popular at all. Anti-big government conservative under LBJ after Kennedy. That was not a very popular thing to do. And I hope it doesn't take, whatever the math is, 53 years for Sweden to go from the place you're now in to the place where you deserve to be, throwing off this intolerant government, throwing off these idiots who are persecuting you, throwing off these corrupt people who are feasting off the taxpayers. But this is something to watch at a later moment. We shouldn't really dive into it now. And I just want to make sure, if you hadn't seen it, that you get a chance to look at this, because you'll enjoy it. If we go to the next page, though, of the presentation, this, Biljana, you know this, but our audience probably doesn't know much about Sweden. And maybe, Jason, did you know that Sweden was neutral, for many decades? And it only really started becoming more engaged in pan-European, both the EU and NATO, I think, in 2009. And the reference here is Wikipedia, which is not often you want to start with Wikipedia and then check it. You don't want to take it as an authority. But I did check it, and I think it's correct, Biljana, that Sweden was not fully engaged and still is not completely engaged inside NATO and inside the EU, though Sweden has been among the more adventurous European nations in Afghanistan and in Libya, particularly from 2009 forward when Hillary was Secretary of State. Is that your understanding, Biljana?
Yeah, that's correct. And now there is one, I would say, organization which is trying to be a political conservative party, and they suggested to join the NATO. So that's kind of the only conservative organization I have seen. It's quite brand new. It's written MED, so for Medborgare. But this is the only group I've heard that want to join the NATO. I think there have been talks about joining the NATO. As we talked before, I can imagine that the think tanks where Carl Bildt participates in have already foreseen this development.
Right.
And there is a very strange talk about Swedes preparing for a war and having readiness individually to be ready to stand a war. What kind of war would that be, and why is it necessary to talk about that now? It's very unclear. Is it that we are pushing for the violence is so unbearable now that the police cannot contain it? Would that be a solution that we get United Nations soldiers? Would it be a solution to join the NATO and feel more protected because of that? Is that why we are allowing so much violence in the country, so that there is a sense of uncertainty? So yes, we can push it towards NATO. Yeah. It's very possible to speculate on this and think why is it happening? Why is it allowed? And why suddenly we are talking about joining the NATO 100%?
And that actually feeds in to some of the work that Jan Weinberg has done about how the Clintons embrace instability around the world, how Bill Clinton did as president, how Hillary Clinton did as Secretary of State, how instability creates both a perceived need for national and local government as well as demand for military equipment and related deals around the world. Now, one thing I do want to mention for our audience, if we click on this link, the Slate link, Slate is not known, this is the third one now, is not known for its deep knowledge of finance. It's a left-leaning sort of political journal. But they wrote a piece here highlighting how many billionaires there seem to be in Sweden. There are quite a few very large families. The Wallenbergs used to dominate everything, but they're not even high on this list of billionaires. There's a whole bunch of new ones coming out of, I think, IKEA, the global discount furniture chain, and then H&M, the global retailing chain. And so in this strange country where taxes are very, very high, and there's some social safety net, somehow this cadre of billionaires seems to do well around the world. And perhaps they're not getting the kind of attention inside Sweden that they might get, because as you described, the press in Sweden is either owned by these people or influenced by these people, that there isn't the kind of inquiry say, wait a minute, why are there so disproportionately many billionaires coming out of a country that makes it very difficult for the lower middle, junior level professional type person to amass any wealth? What's going on here?
You mentioned IKEA. I don't know if you're aware of this, Charles, but Quinn Michaels' research has identified that IKEA is the progenitor of one of the largest and most powerful AI systems in the world.
Wow. I knew there was something about those Swedish meatballs in the store.
It's the cinnamon buns.
But if we go back
IKEA is not a Swedish company anymore. I mean, their headquarters are in Holland.
Really? But the family that controls it is Swedish, right?
Don't.
I think they originally were.
Billionaires live. I suppose. But the company's headquarters are in Holland. So I don't think it is. It has the Swedish flag. It is originally a Swedish owner, a Swedish citizen who started it, and his family is continuing it. But I don't think these people necessarily live only in Sweden, and that the company is taxed according to Swedish tax system. And also, you know that IKEA is one of the main contributors to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, well, on the next page, we're going to cover some of that, and but absolutely. Now, one thing, I don't know, Biljana, if you've had a chance, you probably do look through the UNCTAD statistics that go into all the countries of the world and show how these countries have prospered over many, many years. Have you ever spent time looking at that kind of stuff?
No. You want to tell us?
Yeah, I will show you in the next slide, in a couple slides from now. But basically, that information, if we could stay on the, that information shows conclusively that and of course Sweden's currency fluctuates against the US dollar in different ways in different years, but it shows conclusively that actually when you look at the biggest piece of an economy's output, which is typically the consumption of the households, that piece has actually declined for Sweden from the peak in the years 2011 to 2013. They were rising, and then since 2013 to 2015, it sharply declined in a way that, had we suffered the kind of decline that your country has suffered in the United States of America, there would be riots in the streets here, because it's such a sharp fall off.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing is, this is pretty interesting. I spell checked this thing myself, and I'm just now seeing a hilarious typo where I say here, President Trump called Sweden's leaders "ut" instead of "out," and they didn't catch that. I guess they must have thought that was I was using a Swedish
word.
Yeah, call them out. But you remember, Biljana, because I think we were talking back then that President Trump made news in February of 2017 when he seized on what was going on in Sweden, and then immediately, of course, the Swedish press and politicians jumped down Donald Trump's throat for making these negative comments and saying there were problems in Sweden, but more recently,
something blew up the next day, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, but more recently, he was very much proven correct. If we hit this zero hedge link, and I think this is something that I don't know whether you already spoke about this, Biljana, in your presentation, but this zero hedge piece. But the notion that you're going to have no-go zones in a country. I know from personal experience of a friend that there are such no-go zones in France, and I suspect there are such no-go zones in the United Kingdom. This is a non-concept. We cannot have countries that are nationally run, in theory, where taxpayers in a country are contributing for the common defense of a country, and then say, oh, it's okay to have these zones inside the country where the police are too scared to go, where people do what they want to do, whether it's radical Islamic extremists or radical right-wing extremists. You can't have that. That's not a country. That's cancer.
That's Mad Max.
And I don't know what the truth is, but I suspect that this zero hedge article is closer to the truth than the calm assurances we may get out of the national government in Sweden.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly, I actually think that now the violence is moving away from the suburbs and is coming to town, to the center of town. I live in the center of Gothenburg, and a shop very close by to me got 2 robberies, one of them with guns.
Wow.
And this is really the heart of the city where I live. So I think that we are going to see a movement of the heavy crime moving to town and not just staying away in what you would call no-go zones. Depends. I mean, for some people, some certain areas are no-go zones. For other people, other areas are no-go zones. But what you have to know is that the Swedish municipalities
are forcing the big corporation or corporations that own real estate and properties to give apartments, first of all, to arriving migrants. So the Swedes are asked to move from where they live and to get into another area, another apartment, because the real estate owner is obliged by the municipality to offer certain amount of apartments to migrants, first of all. So what you have is a very strange phenomenon. They are creating and forcing segregation. There is an area here not in Gothenburg called Kortedala, and I know people that are moving out of the area because of the violence and because it's more and more newcomers that they don't feel comfortable and safe with. The municipalities are enforcing this. The Swedes have to wait on line. First of all, you know that to get to rent an apartment in Sweden, you have to wait on a line. Like in the Soviet, you waited for a car. Here, you wait on a line to get an apartment, to rent an apartment. So now, if you're waiting for, let's say, 8 years, 14 years in Stockholm. Now with the prioritization of the migrants, it's going to be even harder to get an apartment. So of course you have a reaction among people about that. So people are actually, because of the low interest rate, they are buying. So the market, the real estate market, is not going down. As you said in Zero Hedge, someone wrote that it's going down. It's not going down in Gothenburg. Maybe someone wants it to go down. As I heard that Soros is investing in the real estate in Sweden, and he's betting that the prices will go down and the bubble will crash.
Wow.
He's doing that, but I don't see it happening yet. It's definitely not happening in Gothenburg.
What did we do wrong in a prior life to end up with George Soros on the planet? I mean, that man is just,
terrible guy.
He's a horrible
on humanity. Now, let me ask you this very quickly, Biljana. You mentioned armed robbery there. Average citizen in Sweden cannot purchase a gun, correct? I would imagine gun crime is quite rare.
No. It's I'm not. We are not allowed to have any kind of weapon. We are not allowed to have pepper spray.
Mm-hmm. So this is particularly shocking for a society like that.
What?
Yeah, but I don't understand, if it's so difficult to have a weapon, why is it so easy for criminals to get a weapon? These people arrived in this country for not long ago and they already know how to get a weapon, you know? I lived here for so many years and I've never seen a weapon. So it seems to be an organized activity which is not contained and not controlled. Because mainly the borders are open, so there is zero control on what's happening.
So, Jason and Biljana, maybe we should go, I'm mindful of the time, if we could go back into the presentation and maybe go to the next page. And there, I just want to, maybe Biljana, you yourself have never looked into these type of figures, but I find them to be very, very useful. And Jason, I'm confident that you have not yet looked at them just because you do things that are much more interesting than this. But there are two great databases that are free, and they're source linked at the bottom. This UNCTAD database, you don't need to pull it up. And then, believe it or not, the American CIA does produce, and this is a link to quite a few years of the production of their available for the public version of their analysis of each country. So there are a lot of really interesting, cool facts to me, the nerd, that you can get out of these documents. And I just want to rip through them and compare and contrast. We use a convention, Biljana, that a red number is a bad number and a green number is a good number. Just for those people who don't particularly like numbers. So on the right, you'll see a lot of red. So when you're comparing, if you could make it slightly smaller, so I can, we start in any country. The place you start is the size of the market, which is the number of people who live there. And so you know, but most people don't know, that Sweden is a relatively small country. This is July 2015, to make it comparable with the numbers. In Sweden, there were 9.8 million people. United States, 321 million. And basically, as countries get bigger, if they're homogeneous in their laws or whatever, there is an advantage to scale as a country gets bigger to a point. And then when it gets to be India and China, or long before that, there's a disadvantage to scale. But one could argue that the United States is a very interesting, deep market of people. We have the same population growth rates back in 2015. You're slightly ahead of us in Sweden at 0.8%, but they don't give you the information in this document about how much of that population growth is coming from the faster than normal birth rate of the immigrant population, and how much is coming from the resident Swede, the original Swede. I have a suspicion that the non-immigrant population in Sweden is probably falling, and that the immigrant population is probably reproducing more rapidly. But we had to give Sweden a green number. So because population growth rate is good, you think about a business, you want to sell more and more products and services, a rising population is better than a falling one. Slightly better. But here's the problem. In Sweden, your median age is 41.2 years. That's really high. We're high at 37.8, but in Sweden, you're 41.2 is your median age, which means that as somebody's age rises, as the median age of a population rises, the palette of products and services that they want to buy changes, and they can actually reduce their consumption versus a more robust consumption pattern. So when we look, you probably knew this, Biljana, but maybe you didn't. The average, this is consumption of all goods and services by households divided by the number of people. That means for every person in America, it's $38,400 a year, right? Is what we spend per person on consumption. Whereas in Sweden, you spend $22,800. So this is not, bigger is better in the sense of trying to understand where is their economic vitality, but you have a small population that spends not all that much money. So when we think about the Swedish market for goods and services compared to the US market for goods and services, though you're 3% of our population, you're only 2% of the consumption. So when a business person in America is saying, okay, I've got this great business, Crowdsource the Truth, what market should I hit next? Way down the list is Sweden, because it's a small market, a different language, you speak English there, but so these are structural disabilities that Sweden has versus the United States in terms, just economic terms, not talking culture or anything else, like just pure economics. The third thing here is that when you look at the size of your exports, $225 billion, $226 billion versus your consumption, your internal market, you're basically selling more goods and services abroad than you sell, slightly more, inside your own country, which is fine. You're not so far away from some neighboring countries. You can do that to the extent it's, let's say you're selling into Finland or you're selling into Norway or selling, whatever. It means that if you're selling from factories inside Sweden, you're heavily dependent on your international business. Whereas in America, we're not. You see, even though we export $3.7 trillion, our internal market is so big.
Yes, of course.
That our businesses have an easier, way of operating. It's tough to serve international customers, particularly far away in different languages. So that's an issue. You look as well, the investment, right? You're investing $120 billion a year inside your country to keep your plants and infrastructure running. We have a scale advantage. We're investing $2.3 trillion. Our investment is 19% of our consumption. Your investment is 54%. So you're far more capital intensive than we are. You're also another green number you get is you're concentrated more in your cities. And people talk about population density. They talk about how we're overpopulated, where our land can't support people. That's just rubbish based on the actual, when you really look carefully at the fact that countries, our country, your country, concentrate their populations inside cities. So the true distribution of population is not even. It's in the interior, the non-urban portions of Sweden's a very big country. I know there's a wasteland portion of it, but it's a very big country. We're a massive country. We could absorb a lot more people. We could shoulder a lot more growth, even in your country and our country. So there's something wrong that our growth rates are this low in population. Then you look, this is an important statistic for the HIV/AIDS work that we talked about in the past. If you look at the doctors per 100,000, in Sweden you have 393 doctors per 100,000 people. We only have 245. So either you have too many, which I think is probably the case, or we have too few. But there shouldn't be this kind of a distinction that you have 393 per 100,000 and we have 245. That doesn't make sense. But the interesting reason I put this up here is because we're going to go through this on other countries. You go to the poor countries where the Clintons have been fighting, in theory, HIV/AIDS. You know what the number is of doctors per 100,000 people? 3.
3, yeah.
You know,
that was one of our first shows. You showed that.
Right. So you know, that's an interesting statistic, and the fact that we're about the same on hospital beds per 100,000 tells you that's probably, you know, we'll look at this across many different countries, but this quick slice, forget GDP, I haven't talked about, you know, gross domestic product, this quick slice through a country, any old country, allows you very quickly to get a sense as a business person, you know, is this an attractive place for me to invest? Is it not an attractive place for me to invest? Are there structural disadvantages? Are there structural advantages? And what I fear Sweden has done over decades now, rather than look at this and say, you know what, you know, we're only 9.8 million people and there's 7.6 billion people around the planet. We don't deserve to run the world via the UN and the World Bank and stuff like that. That's not going to happen. Because at some point, China and India are going to wake up. The bigger countries are going to wake up and say, you know, wait a minute, this United States over here, 321 million, I'm 1.3 billion, you're 1.4 billion. Why is the US so influential in these international organizations? We're going to get pushed out. And Sweden certainly will get pushed out of any global project. So rather than looking at this and saying, you know, globalism is great, you know, this UN stuff is fun, we get to fly to Geneva and New York and have parties, you know, maybe the smarter move for Sweden is to say, you know what, the globalist project hasn't worked so well. The US is going on a different course. This Trump guy may have his issues, but, you know, the economy's kind of humping, and he's only been here less than a year. Maybe it's time for Sweden to think, is there a way for Sweden to be the first Nordic country, first Scandinavian country, to join the party that seems to be happening, to mend its ways? And, you know, I think there could be quite an opportunity, frankly, between, you know, Sweden having a pivot and what Donald Trump is putting into place inside and outside the United States.
You've just named the 4th book in the series.
What's that?
That's not going to happen.
If we go to page 8. All right, now this...
Well, if you don't mind me saying something, what you're saying... Yes, if you compare a huge country like the United States and Sweden, I guess Sweden does feel small in the global world of markets, and I guess there is a need to join forces with other entities and other countries and unions. Now the discussion is if this is if it is an option. To continue with the European Union as part of the European Union. For some people, there is no question about it that we are part of the Union and will continue with the Union. But for a lot of people, there is a big question about it.
Including me.
Yes, and including me for political reasons. Politically, service-wise, and for me as a scholar in group decision and negotiation, I think our chances to influence our lives here politically are minimized if we join a bigger and further away government in giving up control over our society to people that are neither living here, not participating in our communities to represent it somewhere. This is not work, and has actually never worked in any efforts that has been made in such huge communities. You have the idea to create the European United States. I don't think this is going to work, at least not in this stage, and definitely not with the migration issues and violence issues and terrorism issues we have. But there is a push for it. And then there is another idea here, and some people feel for that. They prefer not to be part of the European Union. They prefer to be part of a Nordic Union. So they want the Nordic countries here, Scandinavia, to organize and have their own union. They think that they will be much stronger and more independent, both politically and economically, if they join forces. Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and Finland and Sweden. So there are these ideas too. This is not discussed. This is one of the taboo topics, which I think it's unnecessary to be a taboo. It has to be an open subject. People should be able to express what their dreams are and what they think is the best for their families and their communities. But it's not discussed. But it's out there. There are people who are thinking about it.
Yeah. Well,
so I don't know how you would see it from an economical point of view, if you think it's a good idea. Well, I have never seen any discussion on that.
Well, so I think I was somebody, you may not know this, who on Bloomberg Television, and I think it was 2011, suggested that Germany should leave the EU. You know, I think the European Union is a crazy idea the way it's done. I think it is just another gigantic bureaucracy, and you know, it makes sure we tried something like that prior to the Constitution. We had what was called the Articles of Confederation, where it just didn't work. And I think this idea of, you know, small countries and several very large companies, Germany, France, and the UK, banding together to create yet a new bureaucracy, picking it as their capital. I mean, I love Brussels, but, you know, really? You know, there's a series of bad decisions. And what I'm saying is, you know, to me, given the long, deep ties that exist across the Atlantic between the United States and Sweden, the many business ties that do solidly exist between our two countries, the common, you know, we have, as you know, many Swedish people living, former Swedish people living in Minnesota, in the Midwest, and in Delaware, other places.
Why do we have that?
Well, because there was a Swedish colony in Delaware, and
really?
And so it's not like suggesting that we have, let's say, I don't know, the United States forge close ties with Iran. I mean, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But I think you're absolutely right and spot on about the EU stuff. And what I wanted to do quickly through here is just, these are links to go through for other people. But you brought up the Clinton Foundation, you brought up the IKEA Foundation, you brought up the Swedish Lottery. Now, most people don't know that the company that runs the Swedish Postcode Lottery is not a lottery. It's not a charity. It's a private company.
No, it's not. It's a business. Yeah.
It's a private company. And Jason and I were talking, you know, lotteries are just like the earthquake relief, right? You don't really know how much money was sent towards earthquake relief. You don't really know how many lottery tickets were sold. So,
someone does,
yeah.
No?
Well, not if you game the system, not if you have crooked trustees and a crooked accounting firm. You know, it's a way to create money out of thin air. And in the case,
exactly.
In the case of this postcode lottery, they brag about, you know, having contributed tons of billions of euros over its long life, the various postcode lotteries, to charities, including the Clinton Foundation charity, right, specifically the one that doesn't exist, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. They brag about doing that, and they brag about spending 50 cents of every dollar on charity. There's another way of looking at that half open, half shut, you know, glass of water. You're spending 50 cents on charity. What happened to the other 50 cents? That went into the pockets, and this is the declared money We don't know how much additional money may have been raised for the lottery. We don't know how much money was siphoned off, in non-arm's length bidding contracts for providing services. This whole Nova Media thing needs to be investigated forthwith in the UK, in Holland, in Sweden, and I think in several other countries where it now has operated lotteries. And in the case of this Clinton Foundation in Sweden, that I sent you offline, Biljana, that thing from 2014, the official story was that the Swedish arm of the Clinton Foundation was set up in 2011. Remember, Hillary was Secretary of State starting in 2009. This story, don't pull up the link now, won an award by John Solomon, who is the guy who's now, he's a friend, an acquaintance of ours, who is now leading the charge on the Uranium One exercise. So he knows all about this Clinton Foundation. He's looking at Uranium One. He's going to tie this all together. I think there are uranium connections as well into Sweden and elsewhere. But the official story is it began in 2011. That's rubbish. The Swedish government has been supporting, and Swedish entities have been supporting the Clinton Foundation since 2003 or 4. Okay, we know this, and you've already pulled this up before. This link here, you don't need to pull it up now, shows that Sweden and SIDA, the Swedish Development Association, certainly had been supporting the Clinton Foundation by 2008 when this list was printed. But in fact, there's a book that we've pushed here called Man of the World by Joe Conason. In fact, there's extensive discussion that it was in 2003 that the Swedish government began to support the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS program when it didn't exist. It hadn't been formed yet. So how did the Swedish government send money to the Clinton Foundation starting in 2003? And where are the records of all that?
Yeah, good question.
So now one of your, I think you know this man, Dr. Marcelo.
Yes.
If we pull up this link, he's the editor-in-chief of this site.
Yes.
And I've spoken to him once on either Skype or phone, or I forget which. He has Professor Marcelo Ferrata Danoli. And doesn't he come out of Chile?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
I've talked to him personally once, yes.
But here are two links, Biljana, I'm sure you've probably seen them before, that relay some of the tangled ties, the many tangled ties between the Clinton Foundation itself, the Clinton entities, and various Swedish interests, including Ericsson, that was trying to gain business in Iran and elsewhere.
It's a known story about Ericsson and how Ericsson got rights in Iran, as I understand, and how they paid huge amounts of money to Clinton for speeches.
Right.
And it's related, of course, also to Lundin business. So he's writing about all that. This is known, but I don't know to what extent this has really been fully and completely investigated, particularly because, as I sent you in my slides, Carl Bill was involved in the Lundin business.
Right.
So now with Ericsson also, is it possible to conclude that this is not a corrupt format where they are basically paying for getting rights in Iran by paying to the husband of Hillary Clinton, and she is in her position in the government is actually arranging this for them.
Well, there's a special...
If this is the case, then it's not. It's related to Swedish business, not related so much to Swedish government per se at that time.
Right.
But it's definitely pay for play.
Right. We Biljana, in this country, we have the expression "hino," H-I-N-O, husband in name only. That would be that would be Bill Clinton and Hillary. But so this actually, you raised some excellent points. There's two links. If we go back into this slide, there's two links here. Don't need to pull them back up. At your leisure, investigators of the United States, the FBI, you really need to read these articles because Biljana has mentioned a point. She's being very nice. The actual laws inside this country, if they are applied, strictly prohibit the behavior that is discussed in these articles. So the question is, what really did happen in this period, particularly 2009 to 2013? You are absolutely not allowed to take a payment either from a foreign government or from a company heavily influenced by a foreign government. Under U.S. law, you're not allowed to do that.
As
You are not,
Secretary of State.
as Secretary of State, and your husband is not allowed to do it, and your daughter's not allowed to do it, and nobody around you is allowed to do it. It is a serious offense. You are also not allowed to set up a foundation that doesn't provide any books and records of account, any full disclosures of any of this, and creates a forum in the Clinton Grifters Initiative where people can go and have these parties where they meet African dictators in places like the Congo and other places where the Lyin mining interests want to get deals cooked up. You can't use a charity as a way of whitewashing bribes back and forth to foreign politicians, to American politicians, to European politicians. You can't do any of that. And that is likely why the Clinton Foundation has been operated in the way it is operated, where there isn't visibility yet into the actual wire transfers and arrangements. And I think we're going to get some of that visibility thanks to this new executive order that we were just talking about.
Well, I was going to say, apparently you can do it, but perhaps the expiration date is arriving.
Yeah, right. So, Biljana, what we're going to do, if it's okay, because I'm mindful of the time, we're going to now jump back into some Clinton Foundation stuff. And then in the end,
Yes.
the end we'll go back and get your additional thoughts on Sweden. But if I could just fly through the next several slides here.
Like O.J. Simpson renting a car.
Exactly, following him. So this could be a book, What Must Happen, yet another book.
These are the chronicles of Irania.
Exactly. So we do want to hit this first link. And the rules are changing in the European Union on January 1st, 2018.
How so?
There's yet another list that you don't want to be on. And if you go down this page a little bit, it gives you the countries. If you just hit that blue link, have listed 17 countries. I have a little list, and it's not one you want to be on.
Have you checked it twice, Charles?
I have checked it twice because I'm not going to be nice. Let's see, it's some surprising names on here. United Arab Emirates is on here.
Wait a minute. So what does that mean?
This is a list. Here we go. Whoa. Keep going. Sorry.
What does it mean?
This is another example of why we don't like the EU. I had a link that went right to the 17 countries, but this is the way they do things. They have to take 38 pages to tell you something you could do in 2.
Here is the most horrible bureaucracy I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's see, we might get to it soon, eventually. You know, and how many different drafts of this were discussed? And well, if we go back into the body of the thing, maybe it's faster that way. The actual press release, this thing.
But what is the change you are going to talk about?
There are certain countries that you would have thought it was okay to deal with, and that's not going to be the case anymore. One of them is the Republic of Korea, which I think is not North Korea. I think that's South Korea goes on a list. The United Arab Emirates, that one there, yeah. United Arab Emirates is one of the countries. Don't hit that link.
Okay.
That's what we just did.
Sorry. So here, we'll just do
Sorry. Yeah, if we could. Here, fact sheet on the list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions. Or memo act. Ooh, well, it doesn't matter. Fact sheet. Yeah, that's fine. It should have the list.
listing?
No. Yeah.
EU
Here we go.
list.
Here are the non-cooperative countries. Now, St. Lucia is a country that the Clinton Foundation has been operating in since about 2003 or 4. Bahrain, surprised it's on the list. And this Korea, I wonder if they have the right Korea. Is that South Korea? I think it is. Panama is a country that's heavily involved in the whole Clinton Foundation mess.
Oh yeah, the Panama Papers.
Right, and St. Lucia and United Arab Emirates. These are all countries that are not cooperating with the EU, and that is not something you want to do starting January 1st, 2018. So you got the executive order, which bit in the United States on the 21st of December 2017. You got this EU list of vice grip around some countries. Korea, we're going to do a special show about Korea and its many involvement with Stuart Dean, who has expert knowledge on Korea, and the many links among Korean government, Korean politicians, Korean companies, with Clinton Foundation entities around the world. I was actually quite surprised to see that they're on this list. But then you think about the scandals in Korea. The president had to step down. The big Korean companies, CEOs are stepping down.
Samsung.
Right. So if we go back into the slides, we really, at this stage in 2018, if we're looking ahead, it is high time for people inside the United States of America to believe that the rule of law will be applied even-handedly. That just because Donald Trump is president and some of us may be friendly to him, does not mean in a legal court case that we should have the upper hand. The facts should be the facts. The law should be applied even-handedly. And if that does happen in the United States or in any country, then that makes this place a country where investors are more confident having their hard-earned money kept in this country. You depart from that, you descend into the case that Biljana was so ably talking about in Sweden, where political enemies are persecuted. You've got to be a nutcase to put money in a country like that. It just doesn't make any sense. So we have talked in the past about getting, and this YouTube link here is to something I just did with Lionel. Lionel is a friend of the show, and he's just a personal friend.
This is a great piece. People should really look at
Thank you. Yeah, we did this yesterday at 10:30 in the morning. It has 23,000 views. It's an hour. Lionel is very gifted at moving the conversation along and keeping me focused. Not saying that you're not gifted at doing that, but
well, you might call it the gift of the gab. It's definitely a different format with Lionel. We try to make this your show, and this is more of an interview.
Right, but this is something. We go back into the slides. This is something to watch if you are having difficulty getting to sleep tonight.
Well, maybe instead of football after your Christmas dinner.
Right.
Do they have that? The Yule log. You can put that on with the Yule log video.
Yeah, it is getting kind of late, Biljana. We're almost 8 minutes away from an official Merry Christmas to you, I think.
I mean, you could very well, I could share Merry Christmas with thousands of people.
That's true.
Very soon. It's 12 o'clock.
That's true. So we've talked about Eric Braverman in the past.
And not only did I talk about him, I sat in his presence, and were I not sabotaged, we might have been able to interview him.
Well, take a look at this link here. Here's what Eric Braverman claims he's doing now.
Really?
And, this is the guy who was temporarily CEO of the Clinton Foundation.
Well, but wait a minute. Is he really there at Yale?
Well, this is on his website right now.
I think it's been there for a while, and he hasn't been seen anywhere. When I first met George Webb, he had gone to Yale to try to find Braverman, and nobody had seen him. That's what prompted the trip to Oxford. But I'll certainly go to Connecticut to have a word with Mr. Braverman.
But notice, he knows how to pick him. He goes from the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation to now he's working for Eric Schmidt, which may or may not have quite as much money as they thought they used to have.
And now with him just stepping down, I wonder. So, and he used to be a consultant at McKinsey. I really would like to speak to Eric Braverman and ask him what happened.
Well, yeah, if we look here, he's not a professor. He's a lecturer, and Biljana would know better than all of us the difference between just being a lecturer. I mean, lecturer is an accomplishment at a place like Yale, but he's not a full professor. But when you look at his writings, he's somebody who does, in theory, care about ethics and good governance. And
I was very impressed with the speech that he gave at the Blavatnik School of Government. And again, for all the people that have subscribed recently and haven't seen that, if you go onto YouTube and search for Blavatnik School of Government, you can see this speech that Eric Braverman gave. It's sort of a panel that he's on where they talk about that, being the one person who's fighting corruption in a corrupt system. It's very interesting.
So here's a person who, if he wanted to cooperate and tell the authorities what happened, actually what happened, then I'd be very much in favor, and I would even push publicly and privately for this guy to get leniency. Because I think what happened is that he went into the Clinton Foundation, he was induced to go in there under false pretenses, perhaps by Chelsea, and Chelsea herself may not then have known, you know, how diabolically bad the Clinton Foundation was. This guy tried to do right, went in and realized there are some gambles that I can't win, and he left. So he knows a lot. He's a smart guy. He's a principled guy, I believe, and it's time for him to stand up and be counted. Now we can contrast him, if we go back into the slide.
I think it's possible that Eric Braverman might be being controlled by someone who doesn't want him to tell us what happened.
Well, it could be. We contrast Eric Braverman with Dennis Cheng. Now, Dennis Cheng is somebody who, at a very young age, he went to Swarthmore, he went to the London School of Economics, those are fine schools, but at a very young age, right out of college, suddenly he's raising all kinds of money for the Clintons, for Hillary Clinton's political campaigns. And, you know, I don't think there's an easy way to do that legally. I mean, even if you're really rich in your 20s with your own money, it's tough for 20-year-olds to go out to the, you know, the grizzled older people who are cynical, taken seriously, and start scaring up all kinds of money. On the other hand, if you're naive, you know, and if you're willing to kind of look the other way, that type of person is exactly the type of person who can, you know, say, who can just, you know, happily break all kinds of laws or whatever, because they think, well, it's the president. Yeah. The president said it's okay. She's going to be the president. Why not do this? So I think, you know, Dennis Cheng, it is a matter of public record that he was in the Hillary Clinton Secretary of State Department as the deputy chief of protocol in his late 20s, early 30s. You know, that's a big job. That's like a person who actually decides, you know, who gets to come into the United States, who goes on foreign trips with the secretary. You get all kinds of high-level contacts around the world. And then he leaves after a short period of time to go work in a secret office that we located. We put on our safari hats in the summer, and we went down there. And we found that 77 Water Street office, which is not declared on any Clinton Foundation filings as being a real office of the foundation, yet it's where they operated.
Well, and that's confirmed by the security guards at the front desk.
Right. So, I mean, there's some real questions that need to be asked about this one. And then Huma Abedin. You know, when Michelle Bachmann, Congressman Michelle Bachmann, who has, you know, controversial aspects to her background, started asking tough questions of, like, exactly who vetted Huma Abedin. I mean, I've talked about this with Lionel, but I have one friend who is about to become the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank. And he's just somebody I know in life. And I helped him. I was interviewed for his security clearance long ago.
Wow.
And I know what kind of questions they ask. They're not, you know, they're not easy questions. They go deeply into your background, all the way back to nursery school. You know, where did your parents live? Who were your neighbors? This and that, all kinds of questions. And so, how did Huma Abedin, with her highly suspect background of her mother, who's, you know, proudly part of the equivalent of the Muslim Brotherhood for women, I call it the Muslim Sisterhood, but you know, how did this person get a high-level security clearance to see all of the email traffic? You know, and who has checked to make sure that Huma Abedin didn't and does not now maintain email accounts in other languages than English? You know, maybe Arabic, maybe some dialect, or on Yahoo or some other.
You think that security clearance vetting would include questions like, do you work for Saudi Arabian intelligence?
I think it's more likely she might be tied into the ISI, or, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood, or to rich people who back such organizations. And, you know, somebody like this, who literally was the body woman of Hillary Clinton, who was with her everywhere. In the WikiLeaks emails, they talk about they were staying in the same
bags and stuff.
Well, staying in the same hotel suites around the world. The people who are this reckless, you know, with the care and control and custody of our electronic communications, and you're going to not vet this Huma Abedin? I mean, I want people with the highest possible security clearance to reassure the American people that Huma Abedin was in fact vetted, because I don't think they can do that.
Well, and that goes back, of course, to Michael McMahon, who said that vetting was one of the key problems. He's an FBI whistleblower who, just like Robin Gritz, was persecuted and pushed out for saying there's a problem with the vetting.
Right. And so another little strand here is this, and these are two articles I wrote back in 2015, but this company, Teneo, which is a loose grouping of various subsidiaries that supposedly are engaged in a range of activities like banking and investing and advising and strategizing and all this kind of stuff. You know, what can happen when you want to trade money for influence is you say that we're going to give Biljana, we're going to pay Biljana money to do a study on something. And there's, you know, maybe there's a worldwide market rate for studies on something, but there's probably a spectrum. You know, if we wanted to be nice, we could pay her $12 million to study something. If we wanted to be chiseler, we could say, well, we'll give you 60,000 euros. I mean, so if you set up this network of entities around the Clintons that is going to, in theory, provide services that are not, you know, public relations, strategy consulting, party attending, whatever, you know, there's nothing currently to stop a crook from overpaying somebody close to the Clintons to, in theory, do a project that's confidential that nobody actually sees. So, I mean, there really needs to be intense scrutiny of this Teneo entity, going right the way back to what was going on just when Bill Clinton got out of the White House in January of 2001. Doug Bann wrote that famous Bann memo about Clinton Inc., where he bragged about everything that Doug was doing and explained the predecessor firms to Teneo. I think our FBI and our taxing authorities and our Foreign Corrupt Practices Act people need to really dive into the full spread of activities of Teneo.
Does the word Teneo mean anything, Charles?
I think it means to hold. Is that right, Biljana? You're the linguistic expert. Something like that.
Teneo means to snatch cash.
So if we go to the next page, what I'm going to do here is very quickly walk you through 4 specific things. We're not going to go through every word. This is stuff this is really addressed to the FBI, to the investigators. People need to study closely. Why was it? And this comes from the dump 6 of 16, pages 11 to 12, for Hillary R. Clinton. Why on 22 February 2016, why did they wait, the FBI Washington field office, wait almost a month to write up a walk-in visit that occurred on the 27th of January 2016, where a high-level State Department person had previously sent evidence of Hillary Clinton's criminal behavior? Okay, this is just when our presidential primaries were ratcheting up. Bernie was making headway. It's by the write-up, it would appear that it's a man walked in to the Washington field office because he said, hey, I sent a bunch of evidence into James Comey expecting a response that you at least got it, and nobody would confirm that they received this evidence, so I'm going to just unannounced go into the Washington field office, again, as the primaries are just starting, when there's a prayer, perhaps, for somebody other than Hillary Clinton to be the Democratic nominee. I'm going to go into the FBI and say, listen, this is serious. Here's my resume. Here's a non-classified summary. But the evidence of these crimes are so serious that we need to go into what's called a SCIF, an SCIF. I need to have one of you FBI people or more who have the same high-level clearance that I, the walk-in person, have. We got to go into this confidential room.
Secure communication.
Secure compartmentalized intelligence facility. And what it is it's a place that's hardened so that you can't...
No Blackberries in there.
No none of
that.
No.
And Hillary wanted to bring her Blackberry inside a SCIF.
And there are multiple SCIFs around the world. We have them in most of our embassies and stuff in many places. But this person was so concerned that they went into the FBI and said, you know, what's happening?
Not only that, this person had hard drives, optical drives, thumb drives with them.
Right. And so this is now, you're in February 2016, 2 months before Comey's drafting his exoneration memo, that there's no problem here. And we'd been over this, Biljana, in previous presentations, that on July 10th, 2015, the FBI opened a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information. So now this is more than 6 months into it. The guy's concerned that you're not doing anything about it. Probably this person is concerned that, that it may have been a Democratic partisan who wanted the Democrats to have a chance, so they're saying, look, do your work. And so now with McCabe likely out, Baker definitely out, the general counsel of the FBI, Trump raising the heat, Sessions jumping in here, the Uranium One informant, we need to know what happened here. There's got to be internal memos here, loyal FBI agents, the FBI vault file, maybe you could shed more light on this. What material came in January? Who did it go to? Why was it deep sixed?
Well, who was this person?
Who was
the
this
name,
person?
Of course, is redacted. And, people speculated they took the font from the document that size and filled in the name, and people filled in Seth Rich. But based on the security clearance and the State Department, it could not have been.
No, this is a person, this here is somebody who worked in the State Department.
Yeah.
And the person who copied on this memo is Peter Strzok.
Wow.
It was copied on this memo. So there's a swamp in the Washington, D.C. field office. And parenthetically, when I got into this, I approached somebody who will remain nameless for now, who on television on Fox was talking about my work and was saying that, the FBI is very impressed with my work way back when. And so I then approached this television personality and met with him, and I said, do you trust the people at the FBI? And I got a squishy answer.
Wow.
And I have to say, I trust them more now. I trust the line agents now. Yeah. But when you hear the Robin Wright story and you hear, the various stories that are coming out of this, I think we have a serious, Mad Magazine spy versus spy problem where, there are white hats and black hats, good and bad cops in our FBI, in our CIA, in our security operations. But this specific case is one I want to know what happened, and I'm going to find out what happened here. We're all going to find out what happened if we raise the heat.
I'll tell you, Charles, Robin Gritz has been very active on Twitter, challenging statements from Comey. I mean, she's going right at those guys.
She's great.
She is. She's a real hero. I just told her last night I think they should make her the new
Deputy
FBI director.
Yeah. Good. Well, let's quickly go to the next page.
Yeah.
If we can. All right. Now.
But if you were to, Charles, if you were to investigate how the Clinton Foundation fraud is related to Swedish officials, Swedish business, Swedish government, Swedish state, Swedish officials, what would you need? How would you do that?
Well, what's going to happen here in our country, the way the charity tax forms work, our IRS has records already where the members of the general public cannot yet see the identities of the significant donors, but the amounts of the donations that were sent towards the Clinton Foundation beginning in 2003 in Sweden, if they ended up in the Clinton Foundation, have to be in the Clinton Foundation tax forms. The IRS has to know that. They're either there or they're not there. Okay? So we have in our country the enormous leverage now that Donald Trump and the Justice Department is raising the heat of getting our Attorney General in Arkansas, the state of Arkansas, maybe some other Attorney Generals, the one in Missouri and elsewhere, can demand these records, demand the bank record. Once we have the inside bank records and the correspondent files back and forth, we will be able to tease out on our side, what the Clintons declared. In the public domain, I already have evidence of Swedish government contributions being sent towards projects that I have emails from the government of Ireland, for example, that tell me when Sweden and what Sweden was doing in given years. I have academic papers that are in the public domain that are after-action reports of what Sweden did. So once we finally get somebody in Sweden who's willing to fess up to what actually happened with this, we can cross-check all this stuff. Now, one reason why the Swedish government's likely not going to cooperate with us is there's massive corruption here. Okay, but the other reason is monies that may have been sent towards the Clinton Foundation for these HIV/AIDS projects likely were used, portions of it were used to purchase adulterated, damaging medicines that killed people around the world. So that's another reason why the Swedish government may not want to. The third is that to the extent the Swedish government got involved with any climate change projects in the Clinton Foundation, there is no legitimate climate change portion of the Clinton Foundation. Never has been, never was, and never will be.
There's pretty much no legitimate portion of the Clinton Foundation at all, Charles.
That's right. So this is something, we have the great Jan Weinberg, who likes to do the imitation of, I don't care about those damn emails,
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders. But the fact is that the FBI line agents who were looking into, this we get again from another dump 6, pages 53 to 54, if we could just make it, we know the FBI, Dopey James Comey cleared Hillary Clinton on the 5th of July, 2016. We now know 10 days after that, that an analyst had completed his or her review of the emails that Hillary had provided into the State Department. Those emails came in on the 5th of December 2014, all right? We know from this that there were, I think, 34,000 in total, but we know here that this analyst determined that there were 1,539 emails between Hillary, HDR22 at Clinton Email, and UMA at Clinton Email, right?
Yes.
But in the ones turned over in December 2004, they provided 32. So they hid back 1,507 emails
so
and
absurd.
provided 32. This is a fact known on the 15th of July, 2016, after Dopey James Comey exonerated
10 days after.
10 days after, they know this. This is, I mean, the mind boggles. I mean, I can appreciate that it's, you know, you've got a lot of stuff. Dopey James Comey was very fond of going out in front of the public and saying, you know, we have investigations in all 50 states, and ISIS and bombs.
Rarefied air up there he's breathing.
Yeah, I know. He's way up there, you know, I guess proving that certain types of people can't jump. But anyway, the facts are that this file and the FBI agents have the ability to look at the real file, the classified version of the file. I think what was going on here is that we have one investigation for, you know, Corinne Brown, who's now, you know, maybe she's having a little bit of eggnog right now, and I don't know, getting ready to have whatever she eats at Christmas time. But this could be Corinne Brown's last Christmas as a free person. She could die in prison going in at age 71. At the same time that they're going after this African-American woman in 2016, in the middle of her campaign, Dopey James Comey is saying, yeah, whatever she wants to do is just fine by me. You know, and there's got to be, somewhere in the file, there have to be concerned FBI agents who are saying, wait a minute, I just got done doing all this analysis.
Well, but they get fired. Look at what happened to Robin Gritz.
Well,
they get pushed out. Or she didn't get fired.
Well, and let's think about that. I mean, Biljana is living, you know, in a country now where people are being persecuted, where my memories of Sweden were nothing but peace, joy, and happiness. You know, there are all sorts of good things back in the 80s there, but now, you know, there's the fate that Biljana is suffering now currently. We are spared, I believe, from that fate, thanks to the victory of Donald Trump, for the moment anyway.
Charles, this ties into what you were saying about Eric Braverman and why this could have happened, because Braverman specifically said that, you know, it was someone else on the panel during that conference said when one person sticks their head up to speak out against corruption and their head gets chopped off, everybody else settles down. So that's what happened at the FBI, apparently. Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, because I'm trying to make sure we don't go into 3 hours. We're doing well. We're 2 hours and 14 minutes.
I should have taken a glass of wine or something.
Yeah, well, break one out. So this is an excerpt, I've referred to it in the past, from Cheryl Atkinson's wonderful book, The Smear, page 242. This is an excerpt which people can read later on, but it's quite interesting. Biljana has written a number of books. When you do, I haven't written a book yet, I'd like to, but when you do one properly, particularly a good one, an academic topic or a meaningful topic, the index is very important. And I actually, when I buy books, that's what I look at first, is the index, to see if there's subjects in the book that I think I might like to know more about. But anyway, when you try to look in the index for the Clinton Foundation in this book, there's nothing about it.
About this book?
No, in the index to this book, there are no references to this set of facts here, which when you get into, I'll save you reading it. Cheryl Atkinson, a renowned investigative reporter, a fearless investigative reporter, worked at CBS and many other places. Amazing, multiple books. The New York Times knew by August of 2016, 1 month after the dopey James Comey exoneration, they knew, New York Times, that there were multiple FBI field offices investigating the Clinton Foundation. It says here, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and Little Rock. I believe another one may have been investigating as well, Miami and also Dallas.
IRS Dallas.
Right? IRS Dallas. But yeah, so multiple entities were investigating the Clinton Foundation for fraud.
Yeah.
Multiple, there were multiple counts. Multiple inspectors general were investigating Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin for mishandling classified information. Yet, these investigations were stifled. To this day, they have been stifled. And not only do we need to understand what happened with these investigations and what didn't happen in the investigations, we need to understand why what didn't happen happened.
That's book 6, 7, and 8.
So if we go to the next slide. Oops. All right. Now, this is something we literally will fly through. It's a long affidavit that was issued on the 30th of October, 2016. So about 10 days before the election at 1:57 p.m. in Manhattan. All right? FBI people swore out this affidavit, alleged a whole bunch of things. I didn't put all the paragraphs in because it would be a very lengthy document. But this categorically states in red that there was an open criminal investigation in the Clinton Foundation to Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information on the 10th of July, 2015. And I submit to you that if Hillary Clinton, even Hillary Clinton's donors, even those dumb, corrupt donors, had they known that Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin were under investigation for mishandling classified information over a period of at least 4 years while she was Secretary of State, collecting air miles and gifts from foreign potentates, if they had known that, even those stupid-ass donors, if they had known that, they would have not backed Hillary Clinton. They would have not written big checks because they would have known that eventually this would come out. And even if she'd won, unless she liquidated all of us, eventually her presidency would have been hobbled. This is something that screams out for attention. We have to understand how many people must have known about this process, because it went to multiple inspectors general and multiple agencies knew about this. The tough one, the inspector general for the DNI, made a decision to refer this to the criminal investigation. Dopey James Comey was in charge of the FBI then, wasn't he? In July 10th, 2015. Don't tell me that Dopey James Comey didn't know that this was a serious problem.
He was running interference for the whole thing.
And McCabe was out there trying to get his wife elected in 2000. Yeah. Don't tell me the two of them didn't know that this was a serious problem.
This was their operation.
Yeah, but I mean, this we have to understand how many people, in addition to James Baker, the general counsel of the FBI, he was there from January of 2014. Don't tell me he didn't know. And how many other people knew about this? How many other people tried to cover this up? How many, and why isn't Bernie Sanders, excuse me for this word, ripshit about this? I mean, if Bernie Sanders is out there, the august genius of socialism, I don't care about the emails. I mean, how could he not care about these emails?
Well, Jan addresses that in the Audacity files. He actually brought evidence to Bernie Sanders' office, got positive confirmation that his associates had it, and we're going to bring it to Bernie, that GE and Boeing had the emails, and Bernie ignored that.
Yeah, I mean, we got to understand that. I mean, there's a whole other show that you could do with Jan on that one of, Bernie and Bernie's wife and the problem.
Doing it.
Oh, good, okay. So if we go to the next page, a few more details.
I just sent you, Jason, a link to Swedish
state or agency, Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, it's called, SIDA in short. And they are one of the most generous contributors to CHAI.
Right, and none of that money, CHAI has never been a legitimate organization, not in 2003, not any year thereafter. Last year, earlier this year, CHAI in, I want to say March timeframe, changed the governance of its governance structure, and the Clinton Foundation the parent Clinton Foundation no longer is in charge of CHAI, but during the period prior to then, when the Clinton Foundation was in charge, governed CHAI legally, it was illegally organized, which means that CHAI was illegally organized. So, I mean, the Swedish government has massive egg on face here. Every single kroner converted to dollars or euro or whatever they sent towards CHAI is a wasted kroner, and they should be demanding all that money back.
The question is if there was, if it was known that the Clinton Foundation is already investigated for a number of years for this and that, why invest so much tax money into something that is under investigation already? Is it easy to say we didn't know, or is it easy to get back this money? Is it possible to get this money? What should they do? Should the agency sue the Clinton Foundation for the money that were not used appropriately or as promised? What is the... it's not very clear. There is no publicity on this topic at all. I haven't read anything from SIDA about this since the beginning of the year, except that they continued to contribute to the Clinton Foundation even in the January 2016, and then after that, I don't know, they kind of disappeared from the pages.
Well, I can answer that question, and I've been asked actually to make this comment on behalf of somebody you guys will eventually meet. There's a gentleman called Fabien Chalandon, and Fabien is the son of the former Justice Minister of France. He and I have been working together since 1985 on many different projects, and he is very well acquainted with government officials inside France and in many other countries. And he pointed me to the fact that starting in December 2009, a French government agency called the Cour des Comptes began a formal investigation of this entity that SIDA has contributed money to. Now, they didn't take the investigation as far as it should have been taken to find the real problems. Now, the resolution of that investigation occurred in 2010 and then 2011 at a time when the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton were trying to curry favor both with France and with Sweden for adventures in Libya. So, there could be reasons that people at the very top of our respective governments said, nice questions, stop asking them.
Right.
And but the facts are, if the Swedish government wants to get its money back, which it should want to do, the Swedish government has obligations to you and many other people inside Sweden. If they want their money back, there's a way to do it, and it involves pressure not only on our government, but pressure on the major donors to the Clinton Foundation, who I would argue, if I were in the Swedish shoes, I'd say, the reason our government put tens of millions of dollars into CHAI is we saw the Bill Gates Foundation putting hundreds of millions of dollars into CHAI. Mr. Gates, you got some explaining to do here, buddy.
Could a foreign government like Sweden potentially put sanctions on a corporation like Microsoft to put pressure on someone like...
Absolutely, it could do. I mean, Sweden, we talked about the minuses of the small country of Sweden getting so heavily stuck into all these multilateral organizations, the UN, the World Health Organization, et cetera, but absolutely.
Maybe tax Microsoft Windows to get their money back or something like that?
I think the simple approach would be to hire some serious lawyers, and I don't know Swedish law today, I'm not a lawyer, but you figure your best routes in. Representations were likely made by CHAI to the Swedish government before the Swedish government sent money to CHAI. And if those representations were plainly false at the time when they were made, then I would think, under certainly U.S. law, the Swedish government might have a case to make against this charity. We want our money back. Under US law, when a private foundation makes a donation to a suspect charity and they discover a problem with it, the foundation under US law has an absolute obligation to try to get the money back. And if the donor fails to do that, fails to try, then our Internal Revenue Service, our taxing authorities, can put the donor out of business. They can say, look, you're not a serious charity. This is all a joke. You were just using this as a way to get a tax deduction for yourself and a way to send money around the world to your friends. You weren't doing the care that's required. You got to pay us back taxes.
Right.
So,
next page.
Yeah. All right, so we're at a stage now where it's time to bring this show back from the road, right back into the courts, in the various states, federal courts, international courts. There is a gigantic record of fraud here. People have been ignoring it. They get involved with it. They figure, you know, well, if we expose it, we're going to expose ourselves. You're past all that, right? We have, I can assure you, I'm told, we know from reliable sources the IRS, in theory, is on this under new leadership. The Justice Department, in theory, is on this under new emboldened leadership. The American population is sick of this. They're sick. Democrats are sick of this. I'm not going to say with whom, but I have had conversations in the last 10 days or so with very powerful Democrats who assure me they want the Clintons in the ancient history portion of the library.
Party.
Yeah, not even in the Democratic Party, of the library. Not even the presidential library. They just want them out there, done. And
500T for taint.
Exactly. So these charity frauds, when you think about them, the U.S. portion, the international, these are the largest frauds. Forget about charities. They're the largest frauds ever attempted in history. I mean, that's significant. I mean, we should do something about large frauds. And I think the executive order, the actions by Donald Trump to simplify the tax code and change management are all signs to me that he's going to do something about this. He's going to get this money back, or try to get this money back, and he's going to do it by putting enormous pressure on the donors. Not simply the Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, but the Harvards, the Yales, the Columbias, these gigantic endowed universities that lent the Clinton Foundation legitimacy by entering into joint ventures that were unregulated and unsupervised around the world. You can put enormous pressure on these people, who, by the way, are, you know, the tuitions are exorbitantly high and growing much faster than inflation. Professors are being paid enormous sums in this country compared to Europe and elsewhere. And these professors, instead of teaching students, are off creating consulting firms and investment firms and venture capital firms and money for themselves. There's a whole area here that Donald Trump needs to get really serious about. And then we need to go back with the benefit of this new information and a different attitude. How come Mueller and Comey missed all this stuff in 2001 and 2005? I mean, we need to go back. Our tough line agents, the Robins of the world, who are still in the FBI, they need to go through the real file and say, what the hell were you guys doing?
They were covering it up.
Yeah, no, well, who ordered you to cover it up and why? You know, was it the Bush family? Did they have things that didn't want to be exposed, and the Clintons had things that didn't want to be exposed, so a trade was made, you know, I won't expose your fraud if you don't expose mine. And, you know, if that kind of a crooked deal was made, that's outrageous, because that deal allowed this thing to escalate to a new intergalactic level. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then how come this man Rosenstein, who runs, he's Deputy Attorney General, he runs the day-to-day operations in the Justice Department, how did he miss the full extent of the Ranbaxy frauds when he was on the team, if not leading the team, going after that? Why did it take him 7 years to figure out part of the problem? Why did he miss all the frauds involving Laureate, the Clinton Grifters Initiative, University, and this Clinton Bush Haiti fraud? How did he miss all that? Why did he miss all that?
Yeah.
You know, and this whole thing with Mueller and Comey and Strzok and McCabe all being in seats at various points along the way, as the Clinton Foundation went from just a screwed up library in Little Rock and a massage parlor /
strip club, yeah,
and banquet hall and apartment, from that to this slew of ridiculous operations around the world that nobody seems to have ever checked. I mean, how could they sit there for year after year after year and miss all this, or were they really just centrally involved in it? Were they benefiting from it? Were their family members benefiting?
Got to be the case, right?
And then how about the high tax, the attorneys general in California, in New York, in Massachusetts, in Illinois, in states that have very high income tax rates? How do they miss all this? They land on Donald Trump for a relatively small offense. Okay, they paid the fine and they dealt with it. But you're not going to look at this in California? You're not going to look at it in Arkansas? You're not going to look at it in New York? I mean, what's happening, so to speak? Now, finally here on the very bottom of this page, we talk about it here, that we're at a moment, at least in our country, that even with the tax rates lowered, some would argue because they're lowered going forward, the budget deficits that we face are massive. Yet there are over $5 trillion in these charities. Some of that money should go immediately to reducing our debt, our government debt. It should go for fines, penalties, interest inside this country. There's a lot of transactions I think have not been papered over. Who knows how much money is parked in offshore tax havens around the world, arising out of crooked deals, paying off politicians, American and foreign alike. That money needs to be identified, and if we can repatriate it, it needs to be repatriated, and the use of proceeds should not be to create yet another stupid program, but instead we've got to pay down America's debt. Our debt is way too high. Sweden needs to pay down its debts. Other countries need to pay down their debts. So, in this holiday season, I'm trying to be festive at the end, upbeat. We have the green, we have the red. You see that old Christmas thing? So, Donald Trump needs to be told by people, and I reach out to him daily, not that he listens to me, but by Twitter and whatnot. We need to start tweeting out to him that stay the course, man. Bring out the bat. Walk tall, as we said in one of our episodes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Charles, but you've reminded me actually that I wanted to mention, and I wanted to also congratulate you that our Walking Tall episode, I had it all queued up here about an hour ago. Walking Tall has been nominated for a Peabody Award, and one of our really excellent members of the Crowdsource community has gone above and beyond and nominated the Walking Tall episode for a Peabody Award. So congratulations, Charles. That's really exciting news.
Congratulations to you. Thank you. Well, just to be technically accurate, what that person has done, he submitted us for that award, for another award, and the process is it goes into the committee, and then the committee reviews it, and they decide who should be formally nominated.
Right.
And then that committee decides who's a finalist and who wins. So it's nice, and you and I both appreciate it. The other thing, though, that's interesting is we've also apparently for that, I thought it was a gem. I don't know if you can bring it up again, but the Mrs. Bill short political cartoon that you did such a great job with, that has also gone into the Pulitzer Prize Committee.
Yes.
So we're doing this to achieve results.
I think you could get an Oscar nomination for your performance in that.
I hope not. That's just
Charles in the Chappaqua Data Center.
But that one, I thought this one should have gotten a lot more views. I think maybe Google was I don't know, filtering it, but
it's not even at 4,000. Perhaps over Christmas, people can go on
send it around.
Yeah, go onto YouTube and look for "Oh No, Mrs. Bill" to see Charles asking Hillary about her emails, her damn emails.
But anyway, Jason, I think this is we've got one more I guess date left in 2017. I think if it's up to.
Oh, that's the last page on the slides there. Yeah, well, I mean, listen, Charles, so, absolutely. I mean, it is one of the most exciting days of the week, Sunday with Charles here. And I also, while you were on a tear, I didn't want to interrupt, Thomas Payne texted to wish us a Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas,
so
Thomas.
We want to definitely wish Merry Christmas to Thomas and to all of our friends at True Pundit. I want to also mention that, True Pundit is, to me at least, a super important independent news source, and just like Crowdsource the Truth, they rely on community sponsorships. So if people are going to True Pundit, I would recommend that they check out Indiegogo and consider becoming sponsors of True Pundit. There's lots of good True Pundit swag that you can get if you go and sponsor them. I think it might be a little too late for Christmas, but I like promoting our friends like that. And I also want to remind people that on this Christmas, while everyone is enjoying their health and happy times with their family, our good friend Quinn Michaels is still in the hospital recovering from a spontaneous collapsed lung, and Quinn really needs our support more than ever. So if people want to join Rahula Club, and they can correspond with Quinn there on the social media platform he controls, they can sponsor him on paypal.me at /Rahula Club, or become recurring monthly sponsors on patreon.com/Rahula Club. Quinn really needs our help in covering some of those medical bills and getting back on his feet so he can continue the important research that he's doing, which recently revealed his theory that QAnon is an artificial intelligence or a human utilizing artificial intelligence. It's a compelling theory, and he's presented a lot of evidence to support it. I would recommend that people go back into the Crowdsource the Truth archives and look at those videos to really evaluate some of the most fascinating videos I've seen.
Well, thank you, Jason, so much.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So
it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And also, of course, we want people to remember to go and follow Bilyana on Twitter. We can, I'll just bring up the page really quickly so that everyone can, we'll get that that poll together that you want to send to President Trump, Bilyana. And then what you can do is, if you want to tweet that out, everyone who's watching the broadcast right now can go and follow you on Twitter. It's at B Martinovsky on Twitter, and information about what's going on with Bilyana's research and reporting and all of that will be on the Twitter page. I really have to thank you for joining us, Bilyana, today on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day, sorry. Yes, oh, right, we're well into Christmas.
Dedicated. I'm so dedicated.
Yes, you are. And Charles...
I see what you're doing. You have this private sort of media that you're creating as citizens, and you are. It's a form of creativity for discussion and discovery and information and communication, and you're stimulated to do that, to be creative that way. Here, although we have the human right of speaking, of free speech, all the sort of non-leftist, non-socialistic or communistic or globalist media are persecuted. Right. They're not stimulated to discuss or to be creative or to have questions. No, they're persecuted. They're swarm attacked. They're sued. They have to hide against an enemy that is their own citizens that are accusing them of name it, like you're all of a sudden they're demonized. The moment you're not following globalist EU ideas or socialist leftist ideas, you're demonized, and this is not a very healthy way of competing for political ideas. It's very unhealthy.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Bilyana, because some of those very things are happening to Crowdsource the Truth and to me. And getting swarm attacked, hive attacked, fake stories being made up about me to defame me, people trying to attack the method through which I monetize my business. So I just want to remind everyone that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored news resource, and if people value these videos and like the reporting, you can become a one-time sponsor by going to paypal.me, Crowdsource the Truth, or a monthly recurring sponsor on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And just this morning, we have exceeded 38,000 YouTube subscribers. Crowdsource the Truth is completing its first year of operation. We've been experiencing explosive growth, in large part thanks to people like Charles and yourself, Biljana, people out there in the crowdsource community who want to utilize this platform to share their ideas. I have shunned large corporate sponsors, not even monetizing on YouTube, because I really want to focus on keeping this news for the community and being sponsored by the community in small increments. Even if a small portion of the 38,000 people who subscribe to us on YouTube would sponsor at just $1 a month, Crowdsource the Truth would remain financially healthy, and we can carry on through 2018 with some of the great research we've been doing and making this platform available to all the people that want to bring it to us. Charles, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas.
And to you, Jason.
It's wonderful to be working with you
Likewise.
through 2017. I look forward to hopefully one more episode this year,
Sure.
and many, many more in 2018. Hopefully, we will be able to do some coverage of a Hillary Clinton trial in 2018. I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas wherever you are in the world. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.
Bye, Biljana.
Merry Christmas to both of you and everybody.
Bye.
Merry Christmas, Biljana.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Charles.
Merry Christmas, Biljana.